Welcome in, Bears fans, to this episode of Wear and Tear, a Bears post-game show. I am Mason West, and today has joined me a couple times for this post-game show. We have Jacob Infante. Jacob, how are you doing today?
I mean, I don't really know how to put it. I mean, I'm doing all right, all things considered. But again, just another brutal way to lose that game. So it's every single time I feel like I keep telling myself, all right, I can't get my hopes up no matter what. And then I find a way to get this Bears team finds a way to get my hopes up, only just to stop on my heart and crush it again. So I don't know. I'm so many mixed feelings after that one. I really don't know how to feel right now.
Yeah, actually, I texted one of my buddies who's a Packers fan, and he asked like, "How are you feeling about this?" And I said a cacophony of emotions right now. And we'll dive into this right now. It's a diagnostic study, kind of background on the game, but just pure raw emotion on this, right? I mean, the downslope that was allowing that deep Christian Watson touchdown play that'll set up the touchdown, the further descent after two brutal sacks, and then the elation that was the two plays that Caleb made to get them in field goal range, and then obviously what that ultimately led to. But so I'm right there with you, but I'm kind of glad you're in this weird mixed state, because I'm like actually feeling pretty high right now based off of what we saw in the game and what we're ultimately thinking. But just what are your general thoughts on this game starting at the beginning?
Yeah, so I think that the big thing I can take away from this is the offense is in much better hands now. I think that just in this game alone, Thomas Brown played to Caleb Williams' strengths better than Shane Waldron ever did in the start of this year. I think that, getting the ball out quickly, kind of masking some of those offensive line deficiencies. And I mean, it came back to bite him with those sacks down the line, but getting the ball out of Caleb's hands quickly, efficiently, and he was accurate, he was precise, allowing him to be creative, allowing him to, make some plays with his legs, which I feel like this, again, we're not here in Hallis Hall seeing how all the meetings go down, but you can kind of tell just by how he's played. It's almost like it's been drilled into his head. Don't leave the pocket. Don't scramble. Don't run. You have to be a good pocket passer. And but at the same time, he's a good athlete. He's creative. If the play calls for it, then run the ball. I mean, and I think that's something we saw Caleb Williams look a lot more comfortable. I think that's the most important thing to take away from this game. And then when the game was on the line, he executed in the 2-minute drill. He put them in position to score. Just bonkers circumstances with the blocked field goal. So I come out of this optimistic. Again, I set myself up for the expectation the Bears are gonna something's gonna go tragically, comically wrong, and it did in this case. So that's about par for the course. But other than that, I mean, I think Caleb looked good. The offense looked better, and I think that's the most important thing to take away from this. So it could be worse. It could be worse. It definitely stings. It's a brutal loss, but I mean, it could definitely be worse.
I mean, I think that's more or less where I'm at. Like, would I love for the Bears to be 1-0 in the division, to have Caleb be undefeated against the Green Bay Packers? Like, yes, I mean, that would be a fantastic storyline going into the second half of this season. Yeah. But like you said, the most important thing ultimately is Caleb's development. And I tweeted this before the game, like, right, can we get your swagger back? Can we get you playing like we know you could play? Because right now you could feel the tide was changing when it came to some, if you want to look at national media, but I think more importantly, even, the vibe more locally in terms of local media, in terms of fans and all that, where you were seeing, people talking about Caleb in a more negative light. It wasn't just hey, this team is holding him back, or the setup isn't where you want it to be. Caleb needs to be better, which he did. Caleb needs to be better. And he was better this game. And like you talked about, he used his legs. That was one of the biggest things, the fact that he got out and moved. I wish he maybe did a little more in the second half, but he had 9 attempts for 70 yards, with a 16-yard being his longest. That's fantastic. Wow. The fact that he was able to get through his reads quickly. Next Gen Stats tweeted this out at halftime. fact that his time to throw was 1.92, which is the quickest time to throw by any QB in a game this season, actually. He had lower air yards. He was averaging a season low 1.7 air yards per attempt, 0 completions over 5 air yards, and then motion at the snap. Season high 51.7% of plays have a player in motion at the snap. All of that was massive improvements. Some of that's Caleb. Some of it was Thomas Brown and his designs, and so we can get into that for sure. But
Yeah.
For me, I'm elated right now. Like would I like the win and all that? Absolutely. But if this is the kind of game that you're going to have going forward with that kind of that confidence that you're going to have Caleb have a 95 passer rating with 231 yards, man, like we're looking solid because again, I don't really heavily care about 2024 to be honest. I care more about what's going to be in 2025, and this is the kind of game you needed.
Yeah, and I think that I mean, if you're Matt Eberflus, obviously this was a game you needed to win. I don't think that this is a game that Caleb Williams and the Bears as an organization needed to win, if that makes sense. I'd say that just again, you're 4-6 now. You've got a lot of really difficult NFC North games to play. You've got the 49ers, you've got the Seahawks. It's a really tough schedule. It's going to be a really uphill battle for them to make the playoffs. I'm not expecting them to at this stage. And I'm not expecting them to keep Matt Eberflus. But again, if this is year one of the Caleb Williams experience, then I can live with that. I can live with, all right, maybe they're not getting a ton of wins, but Caleb's looking good when it matters most. There's progress being made. Sure, there are some ups and downs from him down the stretch, but when the game was on the line, he delivered. When they had a fourth down that he needed to execute on, he hit Rome Odunze right in stride in a tight window on that fade. I mean, and that's all you can ask for. You're putting your team into position to succeed. Whether or not they do, it's out of your hands. And I think that there are a couple instances of Eberflus falling apart as a defensive coordinator down the stretch that we've seen plenty of times here, time and time again, or as a defensive play caller, I should say. And that's pretty par for the course at this stage. I don't feel like he really knows what to do late in a game with the lead. I think he gets too conservative. Some of the execution of assignments isn't quite there. I don't know. I can go on and I'm just kind of rambling, but I feel like there's definitely good things to take away from this game. So I'm not coming away like, oh, it's the end of the world. The Bears are doomed. And yeah, I mean, it's the Bears are a cursed franchise. I mean, you can clearly tell with the just absolutely hilarious ways that they continue to find ways to lose games, but there's good to take away from all this too.
Yeah, I'm definitely torn when it comes to, again, like when it comes to that defensive output specifically, and then what Eberflus does with that. In terms of game management, he still sucks. Let's be real, right? Like that challenge was ridiculous on Christian Watson. It was way too close. I tweeted right away, don't challenge this, because if you had an extra timeout, could you have used it more efficaciously at the end of the game, right? Instead of what they ultimately did, which we can talk about that later in terms of decision making, but having that extra timeout would have been helpful. The punt decision when it's fourth and I believe it was 4 and they decided to punt, the Green Bay marches down and scores on you. I think that you could argue. And then to an extent, though, if you look across the league this week, right? I mean, some of the scores that happened in terms of higher outputs, Philly scored 26, Detroit just shellacked Jacksonville 52, Miami 34, at the Rams had 28, the Saints had 35, the Colts had 28, the Jets had 27, and the Vikings had 23. So your defense still let up only 20 points. Like I can't, I'm torn because I don't know how mad I can be about only allowing 20. But at the same time, that clearly wasn't enough to necessarily win the game at the same time. So that part's also tough for me. And you add to that, too, you can't play for the players. Like Jalen Johnson fell on that Christian Watson route, got tangled up. That one other Christian Watson one, right, where they got down into the red zone where the ball was just hanging in the air for 10 years. It was a solid throw, and Hicks, again, got twisted up and fell. So some of that just comes down to execution, too.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. And I think that it's, especially on the defensive side of the ball, there's some instances where, all right, I'm going back to that first deep ball Elijah Hicks. I don't have the play up in front of me, but if I'm remembering correctly, he tripped up and trying to high point the ball, trying to go up and get it. He fell down before he could even get going. And then on that other big Christian Watson play, you've got the middle of the field entirely wide open, just nobody there covering him. And obviously, whenever we go back and watch the tape on this, we'll have a little bit of a better understanding of like, hey, what might have went wrong here and things like that. But I think it's safe to say, at least from an Eberflus perspective, it's pretty tough to come back from all these super close losses. I mean, you're not executing when the game's on the line. You're not pulling through when it matters most. And even when you have Caleb Williams making plays like this, he didn't cost the Bears anything. Essentially, he put them into position to succeed. I'm not going to, I keep going back to Eberflus because I don't want to say, oh, it's all Cairo Santos's fault that the Bears lost. I mean, it's not even, I think it was Matt Pryor was the lineman who allowed a little bit of initial penetration to Carl Brooks on that block. It's not even Matt Pryor's fault. There were a lot of things that went wrong. If the defense held their own down the stretch on that last drive, they wouldn't even have to be in this situation to begin with. So yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to execution. I don't know what to think right now because I think Thomas Brown performed well as the offensive play caller. I think he played to Caleb Williams' strengths very well. I just don't know. I feel like it's going to be very tough for Eberflus at this point to convince me that he's staying in 2025. I don't know where that leaves Thomas Brown, but at the very least, I feel good for the rest of the year that you could see some good continued growth out of the rookie quarterback at least.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. It's interesting to think about ultimately what Thomas Brown's future might be with the Bears. Whether you're talking, he's here obviously offensive coordinator for this year. Yeah. Obviously, don't want to get too far ahead and all of a sudden anoint him after a game where you put up 19 points. I mean, that's still not not real enough.
Yeah.
But the fact that it looked, like you said, it looked better. You played to Caleb's strengths. An initial viewing, some of the route concepts made and stacking of plays made more sense to me versus it just seemed, like a just ridiculous smattering of things before. Yeah. I mean, you still got, this was like their possessions, field goal, a punt, and even that punt that was still after 10 plays. And that was when you were pinned inside at your own 5. So that was pretty solid. So field goal, punt, touchdown, field goal, touchdown. And then the punt we talked about before ultimately that missed field goal, like that's better and moving in the right direction, especially when you look at the length of some of those drives, 8 plays, 10 plays, 13 plays, 10 plays, 11 plays, 12 plays, and then 7 on the final. I mean, look at the Patriots game. It was 3 and out after 3 and after 3 and out. And all that being said, like you said, I don't want to get caught in the hype and the hubbub where all of a sudden you're at the end of the year, Caleb maybe looks better. The offense looks like you're moving in the right direction. And you're going to hear these, if that happens, these Thomas Brown for head coach conversations. And he's had head coach interviews before. Yeah. And I just want to tell everyone, like, pump the brakes, take this game by game, and let's see what happens. Because you don't want you don't want to do bird in the hand, 2 in the bush kind of thing. Like, you don't want to be chasing after something that isn't necessarily there. Yeah. But at the same time, you don't want to anoint really anything that's going on with this team until it's set. Because at the end of the day, I mean, there's a good chance you can hire Thomas Brown. Like, if he wants to stay and work with Caleb, you're going to be able to do that. Yeah. But let's say, just to throw a name out, because Carmichael head coach candidate, if I'm going to say when Eberflus gets fired, I mean, you'd have to like win your division and win a playoff game, in my opinion, for him to stay. Yeah. You don't want to also leave Ben Johnson hanging on a branch that you could have had. But so let's talk about what everyone's confused by, fuming about, is that ultimately that final drive and ultimately the field goal. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about those 2 sacks? Just, I know, obviously neither of us went back and looked at it, but just at first glance, how did those sacks feel to you? Was that a Caleb thing? Was it a route thing? Was it a protection thing? Or did Green Bay just have a good design? I think it was a bit more of a protection thing than anything. Yeah. I didn't seem to notice any receivers who looked open. I mean, obviously it's pretty quick that he got sacked right out of the gate. It wasn't like he, held on the ball super long, was rolling out, scrambling, and still ended up taking the sack.
it was, pretty instant. They were able to generate penetration. I think Braxton Jones was one who, allowed a little bit of penetration up the, at the left tackle spot off the edge. The other one, I don't remember exactly who it was.
We lost Jacob momentarily. Hopefully he can pop back in here relatively quickly. In the meantime, I'll talk about those two plays. So I agree with what Jacob was saying. It seemed more like a pure protection issue. It looks like to me at first glance, there's a lot of big plays down the field that they were trying to hit at that point. It's so when you combine the fact that there was, I think, some longer developing routes with those protection issues, right? That's what ultimately led to the sacks. When you looked what Caleb was doing, he was trying to step up in the pocket, trying to find, a little sliver that he could come out of, and it just wasn't really there. So in terms of, was there a check down? I got to watch it again because I wasn't necessarily watching like where the check down was, but on those two plays. That being said, those two plays put you in the deep hole, 3rd and 19. But the fact that Caleb was able to then step up, get outside the pocket, evade another sack, right? Immediate pressure, and was able to find Rome Odunze for a huge gain, and then was able to convert on that 4th down where normally Bears don't do that, right? The Chicago Bears do not convert that 4th down play. And as much as Keenan Allen's been maligned the entire time that he's been a Bear in terms of losing some speed and, a couple drops that he shouldn't have had, things of that nature, which are all fair, right? He came through, solid catch that converted that 4th down and put you in a position where now you're able to go for that field goal. So now, Jacob, what are your thoughts on? I just briefly discussed the Rome play and then the Keenan Allen play, in terms of how that ultimately affects your view on Caleb, Thomas Brown, and this Bears offense.
Yeah, so I'd say, I came away impressed with the ability from Caleb Williams under pressure to hit Keenan Allen on the out route, to be able to extend, pick up that 1st down, move the chains. And that, honestly, I mean, if I were playing quarterback, I wouldn't have the stones to make that throw to Rome Odunze as the 4th down conversion, because that's a fade route you're running, and that's, it's tight man coverage. The Packers had all their defensive backs, close to the line of scrimmage. That's a pretty risky play, but it paid off. He delivered the ball well. It was accurate. Rome was able to make the catch in the tight window. So certainly not complaining about that. I think that, shows a little bit of the aggressiveness that Caleb Williams has been. It seems like that's been kind of being taught out of him. I don't know, again, if that's the case, but it sure seems that way sometimes on tape. So I came with those two throws specifically. I come away pretty impressed, and I think that it shows, there's trust in Caleb to make those plays for those, for that, especially that Rome play to be, even considered an option, which I think is great. And, a lot of the quarterback position and just football in general comes down to confidence. I mean, there's so much you can do with, all these physical tools that you have. But at the end of the day, if you're not aware of what you're doing, if you're not fully maximizing what you have from a physical perspective to be able to, know what your assignment is, to execute on it, to, know the technique and stuff like that. I think that's, confidence is such a key part of football. So I think to instill, from a coaching staff perspective, hey, Caleb, we believe in you. You can do this. And I think that that's what Thomas Brown showed. And, it paid off, at least from Caleb's performance. Obviously, the field goal didn't work out, but they were able to move the ball down the field. That's exactly what they were doing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The aggressiveness was higher for Caleb. First of all, there's a lot of also easier throws for him today where it just seemed like, okay, this is where you're supposed to go, and he went there right away, which is nice.
Yeah.
But besides the two plays we saw near the end of the game, there's a couple more aggressive throws. The Cole Kmet one, right, is one that I think he might have double clutched previously when Cole had that bigger break before they got a field goal out of that drive, I believe. The one, it was incomplete, but it was to Keenan Allen over the middle. Keenan ends up dropping it, and also a decent play from the defensive back who got his hand in there. That was a tight window. that Caleb was really trying to fit that in. No way he was throwing that the last couple weeks. So to see the aggressiveness both with his legs, as we talked about earlier in the show, and then with his arm, that was huge. And the fact that Thomas Brown is trusting him to do so and prompting him, I would assume, also to do so. I think that's going to help you going forward. Now, when it comes to the actual field goal, of course, because we have to talk about this before we blend into our break here and get to some of our categories.
Yeah.
It's frustrating because you have 35 seconds left in the timeout. I feel like whether it was there's a spectrum of aggressiveness that you can have, right? Whether it's being super aggressive and trying to do a short out route or something like that. You have the middle of the field open to you too, technically, with that timeout. But if you want to try to hit an out route, so that worst case scenario, Caleb throws out of bounds. If you want to try to run it again, just get even 3-4 yards closer. Or if you just want to center the ball. I think there was just so much you could have done in that period instead of being, let's just let the clock run down. And then ultimately, too, like the fact, like you said, Matt Pryor let some leakage go through. I don't understand the snapper rule, because the Bears had Javon Dexter called for going up and over and putting their hand on the long snapper, but that didn't happen today. That's barely called in the NFL as of right now. I'm confused on that whole thing. And then ultimately, too, with Cairo, we know he doesn't have the biggest leg in the world, but that angle was, that was a low trajectory kick, too. So, there's a lot of stuff operationally that was funky about that whole setup.
Yeah, you're looking at it from a 46-yarder. That shouldn't be a play that you have to go line drive on. That shouldn't be a kick that an NFL kicker has to go line drive on. And not to say that it was necessarily, but at the same time, it's a lower trajectory. You're not going to be able to block a kick if the kick isn't at a low enough trajectory for it. So, and yeah, I saw someone point out on Twitter a rule about, long snapper contact, things like that. Scott Daly had his head down. I can't say that I know enough about long snapper rules to be able to say whether that was a missed call or not. It's still just, it's a bummer. And I'm with you. I think that the Bears absolutely could have gotten off one more play. Shoot, when they ran the second to last play of the game, there were I want to say 30 seconds left. Yeah, 35 seconds still left to play. You could have gotten off one more run. You could have gotten off one more play. And you still have that timeout. I probably wouldn't have thrown the ball just because, what happens if
you don't want to take a sack or something like that.
Yeah, I don't want to take a sack. I don't want to risk a pick or anything like that. I'd probably just run the ball. But, hey, every little bit counts. Every 2 yards, every 3 yards, it counts. You have enough time to execute on it. I didn't see the purpose why they didn't. And would things be different if it was a 43 or a 44-yard field goal instead of 46? I have no idea. We have no way of knowing. But that's one thing where it's it could make life a little bit easier, and it probably would have. Unless you're getting blown up in the run game for a loss of 5 or something, literally just get under center, stick the ball into Roschon Johnson's gut, just let him run up the middle. It didn't seem like it doesn't seem like a novel concept by any means. I feel like it just makes sense. So I don't know why they didn't do that. Not to say that that's that's the reason they lost. There are, a couple things that went wrong, a couple things from a luck perspective that just didn't work out. But yeah, I don't really know how else to put it. I wasn't expecting to be able to, to break down a field goal today. But here we are, and, it's got us on our feet, trying to figure out how to, evaluate this whole situation. But yeah, I can say though, that it would have made sense to just run off one more play. The stakes are so low. Well, not the stakes are so low, but the possibility that it fails would have been really low, but the possibility that it could have helped out, every little yard forward counts, especially for a field goal like that.
And now going back to the whole Matt Eberflus of it all, the decision making on his end, it's so mixed, because there are some times where he'll go for it on fourth down, and I'm blown away. I'm like, that's awesome. That's aggressive. I love it.
Yeah.
And there's other times where he either, he goes for it on fourth down, decision making to punt, or we talked about this whole setup where just then it's this is just so oddly conservative, and I don't understand it. So I don't know what to make of that. And at the end of the day, if when your head coach is that hit and miss when it comes to those important decisions, whether it's the challenges or whether it's how to use your timeouts or when to go for when not, you can't live with that. You're in the NFL, games are decided by 1 point, and those decisions are worth more than a point. All right, we're gonna hit a quick break here, hear from our sponsor, and then we'll dive into some of these categories. Underdog is the place to play if you're a sports fan looking to win money while watching sports. With over 5 million happy players and $2 billion won, Underdog makes it fun and easy to cash in on all your favorite athletes' performances. Compete against other players just by selecting higher or lower on 2 or more player stats, and you can win up to 1,000 times your money. So turn every touchdown into a win with Underdog. I've used multiple sites and apps to enhance my game day, and Underdog is quite unique. Something pretty cool is their vulture protection. If you select a designated running back to score a touchdown in your pick'em entry and they get vultured, they will rescue your entry. Red Zone Rush, a game you won't find anywhere else. Just pick whether or not a player will score a touchdown by swiping right for yes and left for no. Simple as that. Plus, your entry will be automatically boosted and you'll get a 51% profit bonus when you play. This season, Underdog is going to be running a special promo or bonus almost every single day, like profit boosts, discounts, and free picks. Free picks, they're basically a sure thing. A player just has to get higher than 0.5, for example, passing yards for that selection to win. Plus, all new users get a free pick. Download the app today and use code CITY, C-I-T-Y, to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Every player, every hair-raising touchdown, just selects higher or lower on Underdog. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus Alabama, Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Avoid in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT-STEP to 3342. In New York, call the 24/7 HOPE line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. All right. So as we thought and not. So this is basically just something we expected to happen that did and something that we were a bit surprised by in this game. What do you have, Jacob?
So I'd say I wasn't necessarily expecting the offensive turnaround. I'd say, I mean, and obviously you're coming in with a new offensive coordinator. I mean, hopes can be high, but at the same time, I didn't have a ton of hope in this current coaching staff, given what we've seen this year, given what we've seen the last couple of years, that they'd be able to put their quarterback in the best position to succeed. And I mean, there were some execution problems from like a penalty perspective here and there, but I mean, I came away pretty impressed with the way that Thomas Brown was able to minimize this offense's pretty obvious flaws in a way that Shane Waldron didn't do, and a shame that Luke Getsy didn't do as well when he was offensive coordinator. So I came away impressed by that. I think that, I mean, obviously it's 19 points. It's not like, this was a world beater performance by any means. This isn't like, what the Lions did this week against the Jaguars. Like, that's a totally different thing, to score 52 points in a game compared to 19. But, it's the little wins, and there's progress, there was improvement. And I think from a philosophical perspective, you can see the improvement that's being made. So I came away impressed with that. One thing I did expect and was a little bit worried about was some of the run defense. I think that's something Chicago had some instances. Josh Jacobs didn't break away for any massive gains by any means, but he was pretty consistently moving the ball down the field, running up the middle and, picking up decent chunk yardage on a consistent basis. I mean, he had that touchdown, but also, 76 yards on 18 carries. Just pretty solid, pretty consistent, 4-yard pickups here and there. The defensive line got pushed off the ball a little bit. And, to point to the defensive line, I mean, there's only one sack that the Bears had all afternoon. They came away with 2 quarterback hits. So Jordan Love had a pretty clean pocket to work with. Those were some of the things that I wasn't stunned by. I mean, I've come to accept it at this point, this defensive line. It's a work in progress. I feel like it has been for a couple of years. That's definitely something that needs to be addressed this offseason. But that's probably the one thing that I'd say, it's like I expected it to happen right out of the gate, and it did. And even though Josh Jacobs didn't explode for a 100-yard gain or 100-yard game or anything. They were pretty good. The Packers are pretty good moving the ball down the field in the run game. And, Emmanuel Wilson had a 13-yard pickup too. Jordan Love was able to scramble a little bit as well. So, those would be my choices. So I'm curious to see what yours are.
Honestly, we're right there locked in terms of as I thought that this Bears run D was just going to get shredded.
Yeah.
And it's just a death by 1,000 paper cuts. Like you said, I mean, 4.2 yards per carry from Josh Jacobs and an average gain of 8.5 as a whole for this offense. I mean, that's just too much. I mean, and yes, they only ultimately had 106 yards, but they were a high quality 106 yards rushing the ball in totality, where in terms of how they were able to get those chunks and keep the ball moving.
Yeah.
So that was. But when you lose Andrew Billings, you knew that was going to happen. They already had a problem, and you lose your big run stuffer, and they weren't able to replace him with anyone else. Your two backups behind Dexter, I mean, Pickens isn't massive, right? And then your other two backups are just smaller individuals. You just don't have the heft inside.
No.
I would like a move of some kind, to be honest, this year. I got to imagine there's someone on someone's practice squad that is just a large person that's worth a look, because you just have nothing there. In terms of what I was surprised by, I was surprised by the breakdowns from this Bears secondary. That was a problem for me. The fact that Christian Watson only had 4 catches, but he had 150 yards and this long was 60. And you kept other people in check for the most part. I mean, Reed only had 2 catches. Dobbs had 2 catches. Dobbs had 1 catch. And then Josh Jacobs had 4 catches out of the backfield. So I was surprised that they were able to get those larger chunks like they did, which for the most part, this defense has been relatively solid in terms of pass, in terms of the bend but don't break aspect of it.
Yeah.
But a conversation also, I think, needs to be had soon regarding these linebackers. I mean, we know who TJ is. We know what he's good at. What he's not good at, he's not great in coverage. But Tremaine Edmonds, what are you here for? Like, if you're not there to be the big guy in the middle who's able to stop those middle crossers. If you're not able to, there was a play where the throw was into the flat and Tremaine just chopped his feet and let the runner run into him, with giving up more yards than he should have. It really should have been a loss. Josh Jacobs should not have 58 receiving yards. That is a problem. So I'm surprised by that, and I don't think anything changes, unfortunately, due to what the contracts look like. But that has to be something going forward at some point over the next couple of years that you improve on. But to be fair, also linebacker play has been down across the NFL this year. So that's a whole thing. No,
that's true. And I mean, that's something with Tremaine Edmonds, I feel like has been the case, these last couple of years. I mean, throughout his NFL career, but especially here in his tenure in Chicago, where you can so clearly tell he's a physical specimen. I mean, he's huge, he's long, he's well built, he's athletic, but I don't feel like he knows what he's doing all the time. And I feel like there's just some of that hesitancy is preventing him from maximizing those physical tools. And, like you mentioned, some of the hesitancy on the flat there, and, letting Josh Jacobs, run rampant after the catch, I think is not a great look for a guy you're paying that much money to. So I don't know. I mean, and you're right. I don't expect they'd be able to move off from him, let alone they would. But I mean, still, it comes to a point you're one of the highest paid linebackers in the league. You need to be playing like it. So I think those are pretty good choices, honestly.
It's going to be a good day. This is something positive that we took from this game. Honestly, I had a bunch that I could have gone with here, so I'm curious what yours will be. So why don't you roll with this?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I can keep saying Caleb Williams. I feel like that's the easy choice. It's kind of related to that. I'll say I'm a little bit happier with how the Bears used DJ Moore this week.
Mm-hmm.
I think that 7 targets, DJ caught all of them. They were, I mean, a majority of them were pretty short. Either close to the line of scrimmage, behind the line of scrimmage, whatever the case may be. But I feel like they still did a pretty good job of scheming those screens better, utilizing offensive linemen as lead blockers and, getting them out to the edge, as opposed to, all right, we're going to entirely trust these wide receivers to block on the perimeter. And if they don't hit it, then this play is screwed. And more often than not, the receivers haven't been able to block. Those plays have been screwed. I feel like the focus on DJ Moore, getting him more involved, with Thomas Brown as the new offensive coordinator, I think it showed. And it's definitely encouraging because, I mean, we've been talking the last couple of weeks as Moore's production's been down. There's a whole debacle about the one time that he, walked off the field in the middle of play. The whole debate, it's like, oh, was he hurt? Was he giving up? Whatever the case was. But he had a good game. He was dynamic after the catch. He was breaking tackles. He was making guys miss. So I think that's something I came away pretty impressed with. So looking at it too, I mean, Roma Dunze had 10 targets. DJ Moore had 7. Keenan Allen had 8. Cole Kmet still had 3. I mean, it's progress. It's not, we're going to give him 9 receptions a game at the tight end position, but it's still involving him more in the offense, which I was, pleasantly surprised with. So I'll say DJ Moore, but as a whole, I think the target allocation was pretty good. So I'm pretty content with how that turned out in the passing game.
I think it's a really good one. Like you said, I mean, you can just talk about Caleb till we're blue in the face because that's what this is all about at this point, right? It's all about Caleb and what that's going to look like going forward.
Yeah,
totally agree with what you highlighted there. I was going to talk about the way the design and specifically how they're setting up some of these blocks. I mean, the big one that you can point to, just a couple of DJ Moore screens, of course, but there was the one DeAndre Swift run, right, where, I mean, Braxton Jones murdered a man on that 39-yard toss, which was fantastic. But part of that is in terms of the shift on how the alignment, everything felt more narrow. This is something that, I talked about on the preview show, which, by the way, if you're not watching the preview show or listening to it, you should. That's insane. We talk about all this stuff beforehand. A lot of the times we're surprisingly right about things. But anyway, Nate Tice talked about this. That's where I pulled most of the data that I talked about there, but not to dive heavy into it. The Bears were lining up with some of the widest formations in that whole McVay tree, which decreases your ability to get out on blocks if you're the receivers. It really affects your linemen because your angles are just not very good. And so by narrowing the split, or at least that's what I felt today, I'll be curious what the actual stats show. It felt like everything was a little more condensed, which allows those better blocking angles, whether it's on, the runs, the pass, but also allows your routes to be a little bit quicker as well. So I liked the shift there. And then I like that where you saw what Braxton Jones can do here in terms of he didn't look awful today, like in terms of some of the other games he's had as recently. And then obviously it was significantly better than what we got out of Larry Borom the last couple of games, at least in my opinion, because when you're going into, again, all my thought is going forward at this point, 2025, you cannot fix and replace everything on this line. And so, can you still survive with a Braxton Jones as your left tackle next year if you decide to allocate draft picks or money to center because you're going to have to figure out what you're doing at guard, some of these other things. And that's not even, accounting for some other positions and other setups. Because I mean, Keenan Allen probably not going to be here. Let's be real. You're going to look for another, yada, yada, yada. So all that being said, can Borom still be someone that you say, we can survive with Larry Braxton Jones. Can we survive with Braxton Jones here as our left tackle? Definitely not Borom. For another year. And then, we figure out left tackle either developmentally or going forward. So I thought that was something that I'm very excited about as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I feel like Braxton Jones gets a little too much flack in the, the Bears fan base community. And I think part of that's because he's not an elite offensive tackle. I mean, the numbers indicate it, the film indicates it, the analytics indicate it, but he's a solid starter. And at such an important position to have a solid starter, I mean, it's much better than the alternative of just having, bad offensive tackle play, which I feel like a lot of teams would kill to have even just a Braxton Jones type on their offensive line. And again, that's not to say, the Bears are going to, give him big money or necessarily that they should. It's just that I feel like a lot of people are kind of underrating him and realizing that offensive tackle is a very difficult position, especially when you're playing the blind side like that. It leaves you, susceptible to, so many more pressures, especially if it's a right-handed quarterback and, can't necessarily see that side of the field as well. I feel like, obviously they're going to have to make some sort of upgrades on the offensive line, guard and center being the big ones. I don't expect they'd move off from him, especially and this is way in the weeds, way down the line, but especially looking at this draft class. I mean, you're looking at the top 2 tackles are, Kelvin Banks from Texas and Will Campbell from LSU. Some people are considering Will Campbell a guard. So that in itself, might lessen the high end value of offensive tackles in this class. Would you take another guy higher? I mean, realistically, the Bears are looking like they'll pick in the top 15. So, are there any other offensive tackles you pick that high besides those two? I don't think so. So I don't think it would make a ton of sense to move off of Braxton Jones unless you absolutely feel confident in one of those two rookies that I mentioned, one being available and two projecting best as the left tackle in the pros. But yeah, I mean, I feel like at left tackle, at least you can feel decent going into that with Braxton Jones and then Karan Amagaji in the wings, giving him a full NFL offseason to develop, hit the weight room, get, work on his technique a little bit more, some of the hand placement, the strike timing, stuff like that. And then the interior, I think, being a big priority, settling out the guard position, finally finding that long-term answer at center. I think those should be the priority heading into this offseason.
You mean Ricky Stromberg isn't your lock-in center for next year?
I mean, hey, I liked him as a practice.
Yeah, I did too.
I loved him as a practice squad guy, but I mean, he's a practice squad guy. So I don't know. Maybe he makes the 53 next year. I don't know. I mean, he's a third round pick last year who got cut. So my expectations aren't super high, but stranger things have happened. So
yeah,
I don't know.
All right, next up, our concussed corner. Something in the game that was so odd the decision maker must have been concussed. We already talked a bit about some of these other decisions, so I'm not going to use those ones. What I'm going to talk about is something that didn't ultimately cause an issue, but really could have, and it's something that's been an issue the last couple of weeks, is the Tyreek Stevenson conundrum. On the fourth quarter, they were about 11:20 left in the game. The Bears get a huge stop. Jordan Love's on that scramble. This is kind of a twofold. One, Tyreek flies in there and could, depending on where he landed, could have got called for a, hit helmet to helmet or all that. I like him flying to the ball, but the way he did it was a little funky. And then after the play, even more importantly, he starts getting chippy, right? I mean, it's not even his fault necessarily. Yes, he's getting bumped by an offensive lineman. The refs separate them, and then he gets bumped again by a different offensive lineman, and he starts pushing again. And we all know it's the person that throws the second punch that gets in trouble. Yeah. And you would just think at this point in time, with the problems he's had for some of these personal fouls, unsportsmanlike conduct, and then even if you want to go all the way back to Fail Mary stuff, you'd think he'd be more on his P's and Q's. And also, I think he's still good. He's better in certain defensive setups than others, but there's a couple of times where he also got mixed today. So that's a problem. So when you combine the fact that you are getting targeted, when unfortunately you're across from Jalen Johnson, so therefore you're going to get targeted, and you have these potential just lip blunders that cost you yards. If they threw a flag on that, I mean, that's huge. So yeah. I need Tyreek to clean that up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you there, and for the sake of call it cheating, whatever. I was kind of thinking the same thing as well. Just there's some instances with Stevenson where he doesn't necessarily. He looks a little bit lost, which is weird because I mean I really like him in those short zones, cover two sort of situations. I feel like he covers those well, but you get him a little bit further down the field. You get him in cover three. You get him in cover four. The results start to be a little bit more hit or miss because I mean, dating back to his time in college, I mean, he's quick, he's big, but he's not super sharp in his cuts. Whenever, him being a slightly taller corner can be a little more difficult for him to, sink his hips, stay low, be super explosive coming in and out of his breaks. I think that was the one, I mean, even with how well he tested, I think that was something on tape that, I was kind of iffy on him coming out. The physicality, the ball skills, things like that stood out to me. But that was one aspect where I was a little bit concerned, and it's come back to bite him sometimes. And it's interesting with corners because I feel like if you play the cornerback position, you almost kind of have to have a little bit of an ego. You have to be a little bit of a chirper. It's just the way they are. Being around a football team, you'll tell typically those are the ones with, typically more vocal, a little bit more swagger to them, a little bit more of an edge. So I can't be super mad, but at the same time, yeah, especially when you're in an instance of, you're kind of sitting in hot water right now. Your starting lineup position is a little bit more threatened than it was coming into this year. To be, getting caught on some of those, being a little chippy, not necessarily the best look either. So
Yeah.
I don't know. He's still young. He's still year 2. I feel like there's, still potential for him to turn it around. And I'm not saying, oh, move on from Tyreek Stevenson right away. Find someone else to start at corner, because I think there are bigger needs, and I think you have to invest in the trenches at this point. But it's something to monitor, though. I think just, this hasn't been the season that he wanted, especially coming after that rookie year where he looked really good down the stretch last year. But yeah, just a couple things where, reason to be slightly concerned with Tyreek Stevenson. I wouldn't be like, all right, it's over, cut him, trade him. I feel like that's a little, hyperbole, but I think definitely reason to be a little worried.
Yeah, I think the people who are calling to have him like cut or traded, especially after some of the Commanders stuff that went on there, was a little crazy. It's nice you do have Terrell Smith there too, because he's been relatively solid, which has been great. He's had a problem staying healthy. I mean, that was one of the reasons, if you remember way back when they were both, or not way back last year when they were both rookies, they both kind of were going back and forth, and then Smith got hurt. So then Tyreek got the nod, and then he's held that ever since. But like you just said too, there are too many things that you need to work on this upcoming offseason to make another hole. So, and to say like you're going to use a, second round pick or free or money on a corner that's probably old, and that's a reason why that they're in free agency or something of that nature. Yeah. It's hard to do so when you're still getting adequate play. Mm-hmm. All right. We here for moral support. This is an area to work on. I mean, obviously there's a couple chunks we've already talked about that you can look at. What was yours?
I'd say, there's still some instances on, the offensive line and pass protection where, Caleb didn't necessarily have a ton to work with, and he was able to make plays out of that. Sometimes he was able to get the ball out quick enough in some cases and get the ball out accurately. There are some times where he was, not able to do that. I mean, he got sacked 3 times, which it's a far cry from the 9 sacks we were talking about last week.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, it's not amazing. Ideally you'd like to have a little bit more of a clean pocket for him to work with. Like, I think Green Bay's offensive line did a much better job than Chicago's this week of keeping their quarterback upright, giving them consistently clean pockets to work with. So I'd say particularly around the perimeter. And that's a difficult thing too, because, an offensive tackle, that's where, typically more sacks come off the edge than they do along the interior. So I can't hate on the tackles too much, but yeah, at the same time, I guess I'd expect a little bit more at this stage. And I've said my piece on Braxton. I think he's solid. I don't think he's worse than that. I don't think he's much better than that. Darnell Wright, I'd have to go back and check to see how he did in this game specifically. I mean, honestly, I've been a little on his second year. He hasn't been bad, but for a top 10 pick, I was honestly expecting a little bit more coming out of the gate. So I don't know. I'd have to go back and check with those, but I'd say the offensive line had some instances still, while not as bad as last week, they still could have held up a little bit better.
Well, I think he hit the nail. Mine too was going to be the offensive line, because when I read do this, I really tried to have it be like, this is the reason, if you can. I mean, there's never just a reason, but this is the reason they lost this game.
Yeah.
And Caleb hid some of the blemishes early, right? I think he had 3 or 4 designed runs, but then in terms of his 9 attempts, the rest of those were scrambles. And that was because he needed to get out of the pocket and needed to, convert a first down or just survive a bit there. And that was because of a leaky offensive line. Yes, they only had 3 sacks, but if you look at some of the pressure numbers and things like that, it's going to be significantly higher. And I think you hit the nail on the head when it comes to Darnell Wright specifically. And you saw this in training camp, you've seen this year. He just hasn't been really that top 10 pick, set him and forget it. You can line him up across from a TJ Watt, and you're like, you know what, TJ's going to win his, but we can also feel comfortable with Darnell there. That's not what he's been this year.
No.
I know he's had to battle some injury stuff, which is a part of it, but he needs to take the next step in order for me to feel really comfortable there. And then you lost Ryan Bates today. I'm actually surprised that Curran came in and wasn't like an absolute issue. So that was great to see that there.
Yeah.
And then I'll have to look what Shelton was doing, because I'm sure there's at least a couple plays where he's on his butt when he shouldn't be. But yeah, there's still too much penetration. So I don't know what the answer is, because the answer is not in your room. The answer is not bringing in someone else. It's ultimately the play designed to stay away from individuals that you think can't handle their assignments in that fashion. And you can't always leave an extra 2 tight ends to help chip, and even then, like, doesn't help you in the interior pressure very much. That I don't know necessarily how you fix that, but that's something that I'm circling.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair, and it's going to be something interesting. I feel like we've said the last couple off seasons here, the Bears need to invest in the offensive line. And I mean, this year it was Coleman, Shelton, and nobody else. And Coleman Shelton hasn't been terrible. I mean, I'd argue he's been better than some of the centers they've had, like a Lucas Patrick, a Cody Whitehair, Sam Mustipher, guys like that. But he's still not a long-term answer at that position. You still need to find that. And now that, especially after cutting Nate Davis, you can't look at him and say, oh, maybe he's going to be something. He's gone. You know what he is. He's out. And Tevin Jenkins also slated to hit free agency. He's been good, but dealing with injuries. And that's that type of guy you want to give a long-term contract to. I think he's going to get his money in free agency. I just don't know exactly how long-term of a deal that's going to be. And I don't necessarily know if that's going to be from the Bears. So a lot of moves that are going to need to be made. I mean, I feel like Chicago really can't afford to ignore it. I feel like that this is going to be what's going to make or break Ryan Poles here. He has this really good looking number 1 pick, Bryce Young, Caleb Williams, DJ Moore trade in his arsenal. But I think that if he really wants to start to see success, he's going to have to start investing heavy in the offensive line. So we'll see. That's, months down the line, but we're on, it sounds like we're on the same page.
Yeah, you need not that I want to necessarily have this full trajectory, but you need a Panthers-esque offseason where you just say, screw it, we're going to fix the guards. And whether that's through money or draft capital, we are fixing that position.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd do unspeakable things for Trey Smith.
Oh, God, yes.
I don't think the Chiefs are going to be able to afford him. Ryan Poles was still there when he got traded, or when he got drafted by Kansas City. So, it makes sense. They've got the money to do it. I'm with you though. Just even if you have to overspend a little bit, I don't think there's too much thing of overspending for a good offensive line for your franchise rookie quarterback.
Yeah, and I believe the Bears are something like 8th in terms of cap space going into this next offseason.
Yeah, they're up there.
All right, quick last break here, and then we're going to get to the last part of our show. What's important? Stats. Stat from the game that you felt was important. What do you got?
I feel like, and this is what I'm going to go to, 70 rushing yards for Caleb Williams. Because I look at that and, like I said a little bit earlier in the show, I feel like there are some times where, whether it's Caleb making the decisions himself or him being coached into it, I feel like there hasn't been as much leaning into that escape artist creativity that we've seen from him at USC and at Oklahoma. And I think to embrace that a little bit more, whether it was with design runs or against, taking off and scrambling. I think it was last week, there was an opportunity where, he was sitting clean in the pocket. There was Swift open on the flat, didn't get it out to him. He just kind of sat there and just took the sack. He could have, gotten it out to the flat, or he could have, scrambled the ball and, be able to, pick up good yards after, in the ground game. So all that to say, though, I think that it's encouraging to see him lean into that, because I feel like that's who he is. That's how he plays football. He's a little bit of a backyard quarterback. He can be good in structure. We've seen it. He's able to get the ball out quickly when that's what he's asked to do. But that's not what made him a special prospect. What made him a special prospect is what he can do when the play breaks, what he can do when, the receivers don't get open. The offensive line falls apart. He's, athletic enough to make those plays and to, scramble out and to pick up extra yards with his feet. So I was really happy to see him and just the offensive the coaching staff in general embrace that a little bit. Obviously he's not going to be like the, rush for 1,000 yards, Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields type athlete running the ball for 70 yards every single game. But I feel pretty good about exactly how they're able to utilize him and use his athleticism to extend some plays and pick up some extra yards.
And you saw some snippets. I believe it was an Athletic article that really talked about it, but I don't 100% remember, and I'm going to paraphrase this now, of course, but that talked about how the problems that was going on with this Bears team. And one of the things that some rival scouts, GMs, talked about was Caleb, he needs to play it in a certain way. And when I read it, it really was alluding to him having to, he can only play out of structure. And that's what he looks to do. And that was frustrating because it's like, you clearly aren't even watching Bears games, because he's literally doing the opposite, right? He's stoic and almost statuesque in the pocket right now. And it's the complete opposite of what he was doing at USC. And if anything, it was like, no, go do the thing. Like, that's what you're awesome at is, we saw that today, is getting out in the run a bit more, using his legs to get downfield. And Caleb said, I want to throw the ball. I don't want to run. And when you combine that with the Eberflus conservative aspects and what Shane Waldron wanted him to do, it was not leading to success. So yeah, I 100% agree that getting him out there, getting a little, I keep saying it, but some of that swagger back, because you can still get that, right? Getting a layup is nice. And then that leads you to be able to hit the deep three kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
My important stat is the Bears on 3rd and 4th down today. The Bears were 9 for 16 for 56%. And whereas the Packers are only at 20%. And then on 4th down, they were 3 for 3 at the Bears. So 100%. And that to me really shows what's something I was asking for, which was, hey, can we get 3rd and manageables? I mean, were there a couple times they converted on a 3rd and long? Absolutely. And that was fantastic on Caleb's end and the play calling. But the fact that it felt just easier today. Now you hear a number like that, 9 for 16 versus 1 for. The Packers only had 5 third downs. That's also a really big issue. Like, you got to force more than 5. That's insane. But when you hear that, 20% for the Packers, 56% for the Bears, you would think that you're going to win that game. That still shows some of the problem, of course. But just the fact that the Bears were able to keep the chains moving, and it wasn't this 3-and-out situation that we've had the last couple of weeks. I mean, if the Bears played like this over the last couple of weeks, they beat the Patriots in my mind.
Yeah.
Right. I think they win the game before that as well against the Cardinals. That one's a little closer, but I still think they pull that off. So you're having a very different conversation today. So keep this rolling.
And you beat Washington too, I think, for sure.
Yeah, that's another one too. I didn't want to go that far back only because now I feel like people think I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, but I do agree. Kombucha peak performance moment, our defining moment from the game. Kombucha is a premium performance-focused kombucha crafted specifically for athletes and active individuals. This revitalizing beverage blends the traditional benefits of kombucha with nutritional enhancements to support energy, hydration, and recovery. Use code BEARGUTCHECK for 11% off. It's really good stuff, guys. If you're not trying it, this is the opportunity to do so. What was your defining moment from this game?
I'd say going back to that 4th down conversion that Caleb Williams hit Roma Dunze on that fade. I think it shows the chemistry between the two, from, Caleb to be able to hit him in stride, to be able to hit him in such a tight window, and then Rome to be able to hang on to the ball, to adjust to the ball and make that snag when it mattered most. I think that's the one play where I can come away and feel like, all right, I mean, the Bears have something, going forward. And again, we're both in agreement now. Look, at 4-6, this isn't about 2024 anymore. I mean, for the Bears coaching staff, it might be, but for the organization, it's about the future.
Yeah.
And when you have 2 of your rookies stepping up with a game on the line when it matters most, I think that's a pretty good feeling. And, be able to pick up a big game like that. So that's the one I come away from. I'm feeling pretty good about it. I'm curious what yours is, but yeah, I'd say that's the one where I'm like, all right, Rome can make these plays. Caleb can make these plays. It's only going to go up from here with those guys, at least.
Before I get to mine, Kalen Kaler at Kalen Kaler just tweeted this out. Just talked to several players in the Packers field goal block unit, and all of them said they noticed that Cairo Santos kicked with a low trajectory when doing film study, and they expected the Bears to run another play, which in their opinion would have made it more difficult to block.
Ugh.
Like, this just goes back
Yeah.
to why are there things that, whether it's, you and I, obviously we talk offline and all that stuff, and we're in groups where that happens, and you see it now leaking into the timeline, you see it leaking into more national, where it's like there's all these things that we as dumb fans, I say dumb fans, but like fans talk about.
Yeah.
And it's like the fact that we were pounding the table, like, why the heck are you not running one more play? And then you also now have the Packers players who are obviously talking to the Packers coaching staff and these other NFL minds, and they're just like doing the opposite, or they expect you to do the opposite of what you ultimately do as a Bears team. It's infuriating. Like, basically, Eberflus has to do the George Costanza, do the opposite of whatever you're thinking. Infuriating. But my peak performance, I mean, it has to be what you talk. It's the 3rd and 19 specifically, but just that combo, the 3rd and 19 into the 4th down.
Yeah.
How many times as a Bears fan have you had a time where, I mean, we can, not to nitpick on these individuals, but Mitch got him down in the playoff game, and of course there you have the double doink. But how many times have we seen Mitch fail to march him down? How many times did we see Justin fail in the 4th quarter to put him in a position to win because of a sack, a interception? You get into, just in general for a Bears fan, 3rd and 15 is a death sentence most of the time. And the fact that Caleb avoided another sack, which was an offensive line issue, was able to roll out, buy time, zip that throw with confidence. One of the best things he does is he just doesn't lose stride when he's on the run on the throw. To your other first round pick rookie, Roma Dunze, to create a 4th down that you're now able to actually get that to keep. It's something that you don't get to see as a Bears fan. And again, 2025, I get very excited about. Now, all that being said, who the hell knows? I mean, a win would have done a lot more here. Could you just go and just say, screw it, we're going to run through the rest of this division and we're going to win more games than we think we should? Yeah. I mean, the Vikings barely beat the Jaguars 2 weeks ago. They beat the Vikings beat Tennessee 23-13. That's not a blowout against a bad Tennessee team, solid defense, Tennessee. And then maybe this is just me, but I always expect the Bears to beat the Lions once, because Jared Goff just does weird Jared Goff things. Now, yes, they put up 52 points today, but this is a week after he threw 5 interceptions. Yeah. So am I expecting them to all of a sudden do crazy stuff in the division? Absolutely not. But I'm not like, but if you can play like you did today and build on that and use that energy, I mean, at least the rest of the year is going to be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that, like, I have them probably 7-10 right now. I think they'll beat the Vikings once.
Yeah.
I think they could beat the Seahawks, and then it gives them room for maybe one game against the Packers. Maybe they sweep the Vikings. Maybe they beat the Lions once. Maybe they beat the 49ers. I don't see them realistically making any playoff noise. I think that, coming off of this type of a losing streak in the midpoint of the season, I think that's, going to be pretty difficult now. But again, like you said, the Bears have had Jared Goff's number. Who knows? Maybe something can, come out of that. The Vikings they have a good record, but they're cooling down a little bit more.
Substantially. I had to trade it for freaking Joe Burrow in my fantasy league, so I couldn't trust Sam Darnold anymore.
That's brutal. But no, and then this is a close game with the Packers too. Obviously, you've got Lambeau Field, but hey, I mean, you're facing them week 18. Maybe they've already clinched the playoffs at that point. Maybe they don't have as much to play for. I mean, who knows? I'm not counting it as likely, but they can put together some wins, or at least make things interesting, play the role of spoiler for a couple teams down the line. So I don't know. I think playoffs are out of the question realistically, but they could at least make a little bit of a push.
Our masseter, player of the game, aka our MVP. The masseter can close a teeth with a force of up to 55 pounds on the incisors and 200 pounds on the molars. That's a pretty damn important muscle, if you ask me. It allows me to talk right now on this podcast and get excited about Caleb Williams' future. It allows Jacob to be able to do all of his, food reviews for all the fast food that he eats. It's pretty damn important. So, Jacob, who is your MVP for the game?
I feel like it sounds a little cliche to say, oh, the quarterback was the MVP. But I think that was the case today. I think that, granted, Thomas Brown made the job easier than Shane Waldron did. But at the same time, I feel like what he was asked to do, he executed on very well. He was accurate. He was quick getting the ball out. He was creative when, he had to extend the play like that. I think that there was, definitely a lot to be encouraged for, just for the remainder of this season and then for the future as well. So I don't want, at least on first review, I didn't notice anyone who was like, wow, okay, that was an elite performance. I think there were a couple solid performers, but yeah, I feel the best about Caleb coming out of this game. So I guess he's my MVP. So I'm curious what you think on that, because there weren't any like bonkers stat lines from anybody on the offense or defense, but I feel good about how the QB performed.
Honestly, I'm going to say Caleb too. I just think when you look contextually, how many players currently playing quarterback starting in the NFL can do what they did today, that he did in this game. Even if you look, he only threw for 231 yards, but that was only 30 less than Jordan Love, who is years ahead of him, just literally years ahead of him. And if you look for the day, he was what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12th, I believe, 12th or 13th. I might have counted that wrong, but in terms of like the most yards, in terms of completion percentage, which was something people keep circling as a problem for him, he was 74.2%. He had that one deep pass to Rome where I still think that was pass interference. But if that wasn't pass interference, I think that hits Rome in stride. Could that have been a slightly better throw, a little more air? Yes, but that was a problem. That trust ball to Rome, that back shoulder one, that was beautiful. You throw in the run game like you talked about, and him using his legs more. I don't think there's a smaller collection of players that would have gotten the output that happened today in terms of that kind of a game. So, for me, it's Caleb, and especially the setup that he had. How easy would it be for Caleb to just fold in on himself and just have no confidence, and to just not be able to have an output like that today? It would be pretty easy. A lot of people don't have that mental fortitude to be able to come out and play like he did today. So, I agree. Circle it, and like you said too, no one had a massive stat game otherwise. Even if you want to look across the pond at Jordan Love, like I said, he only threw for 30 more yards. He also had an interception, and there's the one touchdown. But it's like, it wasn't, even if you want to compare the two, it wasn't like Jordan Love significantly outplayed him.
Yeah, honestly, I'd say Caleb outperformed Jordan Love, and it's tough. I feel like they're definitely. I feel like part of that though is the production was skewed a little bit with those deep balls, which Christian Watson, on the second one, you had him wide open across the middle of the field, and he had to dive for that. I feel like you could have gotten more out of it with a better throw. And that first one, I think was more of a testament to Watson being able to make that catch rather than, that was a dime by Jordan Love. So I don't know. We'll see. I would have to go back and check the check the film on that. I think Jordan Love still performed pretty well, all things considered. But
they also only asked Jordan Love to throw the ball 17 times compared to Caleb's 31,
which is weird to think about. Honestly, like it's really not that much. And I know the Bears, dominated the time of possession game. I feel like as a result of that, the Packers would have to hurry up a little bit more. But no, they stayed pretty consistent with the run game too.
Those big chunk plays you talked about. All right, last bit here, prognosis period. Just looking ahead into next week, going forward, how do you feel about the team? What are you looking for? What's the most important?
So I want to see Caleb be able to continue to stack up good wins. And this is something where I say stack up good wins, not necessarily in the standings. What that would be fantastic. But again, with this being now you're looking towards the future of this part of the season, what can he do right to make you feel really good about him going into year 2? And you're going up against a Vikings team next week that has allowed 13 points, 7 points, and 13 points the last 3 games. Granted, that's the Colts, Jaguars, and Titans. That's not like an unbelievable murderer's row of offenses, but still, Brian Flores is a good defensive coach. Those guys play hard. If he can prove that, he can build off of this. If Thomas Brown can prove, hey, it's not just a flash in the pan sort of thing, we can have a sustainable plan to build around our quarterback, then I'd start to feel pretty good about that, honestly. So again, is it going to be a win? I don't know. It's at Soldier Field, so that's a nice thing to have. I think the Packers are better than the Vikings, so by the transitive property, sure. I could see the Bears beating the Vikings, but it's never so easy like that. So
yeah.
I just want to see again. I hate having to resort to moral wins, but for a rookie quarterback, I feel like that's where you're at. For a head coach in year 3, that's a different story. But I feel like you can, set the standards a little bit differently when it's literally the most important position in football in his first year, as opposed to someone who's been a head coach now for 3 seasons and still making the same mistakes.
That's a beautiful thing, being a fan of the team versus being the head coach of the team, is that you can root for, all right, we saw small improvements here and we can blend that into next year, when sometimes when you're a head coach, you don't have that luxury because you've not been good the last 3 years.
Exactly.
So going forward, like I said when I started the show, I'm happy with this game. I'm going to go to bed tonight and feel good. When I go into the clinic tomorrow and I have all the patients, because they know I'm the football guy, being like, oh, that Bears win. I already had like 4 texts me already actually about this. And it's just like, okay, cool. You can be sad about the loss. You can be mad about the loss. You can be raging about Eberflus and fire him next week. I had a patient literally say he should be fired, and he's not going to be. Let's just accept that.
Yeah.
Like, just understand what this kind of a loss means for it. Moral losses suck. They're not real. But at the same time, like, this can be a springboard. Now, this was Thomas Brown's first game. They don't have film on him, really, unless you want to go back to the Panthers, which that's a whole conversation. But so, could this be a flash in the pan? They just didn't know what Thomas Brown would come out with, so you had to figure that out? Sure. There's always a chance of that. There's also always a chance that there's something here to what Thomas Brown can do, right? You're going to go up against, again, a Vikings team that is on the downslope. But for the most part, as we talked about, I mean, yes, they're still winning games, but they're winning games not in the same way they were to start the year. It's, again, it's a bit of a strength on strength a little bit going into next week. I mean, I know as an unfortunate Aaron Jones fantasy owner that he's not playing up to the standard that people thought he would in the last couple of weeks. Yes, they have Justin Jefferson, but again, I mean, at least you got a better secondary than you do in terms of run stoppage. So, that they're, and the thing I'm terrified, if I'm completely honest, with Brian Flores, just because of what he does, the amount of blitzes he sends and the exoticness of these blitzes. I mean, he does crazy stuff where it looks like cover 2 and then rolls into cover 3, but just kidding, it's actually cover 1. It's insane what he does. Yeah. So that for a rookie quarterback could be pretty hellish. But I'm hopeful because of what today looked like. It's a very different feeling than what the Patriots game was. Even right now, the Seahawks and the 49ers are playing. The 49ers are up 7-6 with 24 seconds left in the second quarter. That might change shortly here. So, you're looking at even that, and it's like, all right, these are still 2 very beatable teams. I'm not circling those and guaranteeing wins. I'm not even saying I know they'll be close, but, a 4-5 Seahawks team and a 5-4 49ers team that seems like they're weaker than they have been since ever. It'll be interesting. That's my biggest thing. I wanted in December to be playing games that I care about and that matter. And still technically, because of how the division games are sitting on your schedule, and technically because, as the Bears, 4-6, these still are interesting. So that's all I can really ask for right now.
No, absolutely. And, honestly, I don't think I have anything else to add to that. I think that's, pretty summed up pretty well. So it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks. It gives you a little bit more optimism for the rest of these games. I know I came into this one just kind of dreading it. I'm like, all right, this is going to be a beating. Let's get it over with. And it's like, oh, they're surprisingly competitive now. So it's, I come away with it feeling better than I was expecting to. Obviously, the loss stings. To lose in that, last second form of a nature is disappointing, but could have been way worse. And as far as the future outlook, I definitely feel a lot better today than I did coming into this one.
All right, that's all we got for the show today. A weird show, because I was literally I was thinking about how I wanted to intro it. I was like, I had to apologize that, this game didn't have the allure it did when you signed up to do this pod, and then it actually did have the allure, but not in the same way. It's a very weird game.
Yeah.
But thanks for joining me today. Where can everyone find your stuff if they're not following you already, if they're not reading your stuff already, which they absolutely should be?
No, for sure. So you can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Infante 24. All my written articles are over at Windy City Gridiron. I've been doing, sporadic podcast work over at Second City Gridiron on the YouTube channel here. And also you can check out my Patreon. I've been doing mostly every week, doing Bears film studies of 5 players that people want to see scouting reports on. So I break those down and take a look at their strengths and weaknesses and stuff like that. Last week I skipped it all together, and instead I just said, here are my top 30 interior offensive linemen with their biggest strengths and weaknesses, tentative round grades. Here you go for this for the future. But yeah, so that's where everyone can find me. I'm hoping that this, the rest of the Bears season is going to be an entertaining one. So, for your sake and for mine, so it's not going to be like pulling teeth, doing these, recaps here the rest of the year.
Yeah, and if you're not following me on Twitter, I am at West Sports PT. I do the best I can to try to give you some information regarding, the injury side of things. I've been actually pretty damn accurate this year, which I'm proud of. I projected Braxton to play this week. I projected Darnell to play this week. Discussed earlier, like people were saying that Kyler Gordon would be coming back quickly after his hamstring injury, and I didn't amp up the breaks. He's going to miss a couple weeks. So always talk about that on the preview show, and let's also tweet that out as much as I can. If you send me if you tweet at me, if you send me a DM, I also do the best I can to answer injury questions for you, whether that's about the Bears or if you have, for your fantasy football team. I'll do a little bit of everything. But yeah, so go ahead and check that out there. Again, we go live Thursdays, Bare Bones podcast, to preview the game, give you some tidbits about injury stuff, matchups, things of that nature. We're surprisingly consistent, which is great in terms of how things turn out. And then, then coming up, Jacob will also be back on here, which is great. He's going to do another Packers game. Obviously, that one will be a win for the Bears. So we're excited for that. And then next week's game, post-game show, a little different because I'm actually going to be at the game. Again, I got lucked out, won some tickets. I'm thinking it'll be between 5 to 6 p.m.-ish. We're going to have Sam Householder on again. So kind of just be rearing and waiting to go after to hear what we have our thoughts for that game. But yeah, any closing thoughts, Jacob?
Bear down, I guess. I don't know. My brain is, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out exactly how to process everything that's happened today. Definitely come away from it a little more positive than I thought. But just the sad emotion of how everything ended is still playing into it too. So I don't know what to. I know we've been talking about it and breaking things down, but I guess the overarching feeling is I don't know how to feel. So that's really the best I could say at this point.
And I think that's pretty fair, to be honest. It was such a weird game, and I thought there was 2 different times in the game I thought the Bears had it locked in, which I haven't felt like that since probably they scored against the Commanders to take the lead. So it's a weird feeling, and I know moral victories don't count, but this is the moraliest one that you can possibly take. And just be happy that Caleb looked like an actual dang quarterback and looks like USC Caleb again. That's I'll leave it at. But that's all we got for today. Thanks for everyone for joining us. Pretty cool. We got about a little over 10,000 individuals listening to this. That's the Jacob Infante effect, if we're being real. Bear the hell down, everybody.
Hey, what has 2 thumbs and hates Todd Packer? This guy.